You ever have that feeling in your gut that something just doesn't sit right? That little voice in the back of your head whispering, nagging at you, telling you to look closer? That was me, Mark. A happily married man, or at least that's what I thought. I wasn't the jealous type. I wasn't paranoid. But when my wife Emily gave birth to our son Noah, there was this tiny nagging feeling I just couldn't shake. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't like I looked at my baby and thought, that's not mine. No, it was something more subtle. The way Emily reacted when people compared Noah to me. The way she seemed tense every time I mentioned how much I was looking forward to teaching Noah all the things my dad had taught me. And then there was Noah himself. He was beautiful, perfect, but I found myself staring at him sometimes, trying to find traces of me in him. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but the doubt never really left. And so, one day without telling Emily, I ordered a DNA test. I didn't plan it. It was one of those impulsive things, the kind you do almost absent-mindedly. I was online, saw an ad for a home DNA test kit, and before I even realized it, I had clicked, order now. It arrived a few days later, and my hands trembled as I swabbed Noah's cheek. I felt guilty, sick to my stomach. What was I even doing? But then I told myself, what's the harm? It's just a test. It'll come back and prove me wrong. And then I can finally put this stupid paranoia to rest. The results took 2 weeks. 2 of the longest, most agonizing weeks of my life. Every night, I stared at Emily while she slept, wondering if I was about to ruin everything. Every morning, I looked at Noah and told myself I was an idiot. But the doubt wouldn't leave. And then the results came. I remember opening the email, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My hands were cold, clammy. I took a deep breath, clicked the link, and there it was. Probability of paternity, 0%. I felt like the floor had been ripped from beneath me. My breath hitched, my vision blurred. I blinked, stared, read it again. 0%. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be right. I was Noah's father. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face and read it again. But no matter how many times I looked, the words didn't change. I wasn't Noah's father. My hands shook as I locked my phone, shoved it in my pocket, and forced myself to breathe. I had 2 choices. I could confront Emily right away, demand the truth. Or I could wait, gather my thoughts, think before I acted. For the first time in my life, I chose the latter. That night, I watched her, studied her. Was there guilt in her eyes? Was she hiding something? Or was she just Emily, the woman I had loved for years? I told myself I needed more proof before I accused her of something this big. Because if I was wrong, I wouldn't just be hurting her. I'd be tearing our entire family apart over nothing. So, I did what any rational man would do. I took another test. A different brand, different company, different everything. 2 more weeks, 2 more sleepless nights, 2 more weeks of pretending everything was fine. And then the second test arrived. Probability of paternity, 0%. The same result. The same gut-wrenching, world-shattering confirmation. But here's where it gets strange. The second test didn't just test for paternity. It provided ancestry details, health information, and something else. Something I hadn't expected. Something I couldn't explain. According to the test, Noah wasn't just not my son. He wasn't Emily's either. I stared at the screen, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. I had been so prepared for one kind of heartbreak that I never even considered another. I wasn't Noah's father. But Emily wasn't his mother. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This was something else entirely. And I had no idea what to do next. I spent the next few hours pacing, my mind running in circles. My wife didn't cheat on me. At least, not in the way I originally thought. But then, where did Noah come from? The logical answer was a hospital mix-up. Babies get switched at birth sometimes, right? It's rare, but it happens. That had to be it. I had to believe that was it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't that simple. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I decided to act. I called the hospital where Emily had given birth, trying to keep my voice steady. I told them I had concerns about a possible mix-up and wanted to verify our son's records. The woman on the other end of the line was polite but hesitant. "Sir, that kind of mix-up is incredibly rare," she said. "I understand that, but I need to be sure. Please." There was a long pause. Then she sighed. "I can pull up the records, but I'll need a few days." A few days. More waiting. More sleepless nights. I hung up the phone and turned to Emily. She was holding Noah, rocking him gently, humming a soft lullaby. I swallowed hard. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until I had real answers. 3 days later, the hospital called back. and their answer left me more confused than before. Mr. Thompson, the woman said carefully, we checked our records thoroughly. Your wife gave birth in room 307, correct? Yes. And she delivered at 2:43 a.m.? Yes, I said, my heart pounding. What are you getting at? She hesitated. Sir, there were no other babies born in that hospital between midnight and 6 a.m. that night, and no reports of any infant transfers or mix-ups. According to our records, Noah is the child your wife delivered. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That was impossible. The DNA test said otherwise. Are you sure? I whispered. Yes, sir. There's no mistake. I barely remember hanging up the phone. My mind felt like static. My hands were cold, clammy. If there was no mix-up, if Emily really did give birth to Noah, then how was he not biologically related to either of us? Something was very, very wrong. And I was about to find out just how deep this went. The answers I had didn't make sense, and the ones I needed seemed impossible to find. But I wasn't going to stop. I needed more proof. More than just a DNA test and a hospital record. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I requested a copy of Noah's birth records. The official ones. When I finally received them, my stomach dropped. The signatures were there, Emily's, the doctor's, the nurse's, but something was missing. There was no record of a placenta being delivered. No APGAR score. No first cry time. The details that should have been there for any newborn were blank. Noah's birth certificate claimed he was born in room 307, but the medical record suggested he had never been born at all. And suddenly I realized I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was chasing a mystery that might not have a human explanation. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The air inside felt suffocating, my thoughts a storm that refused to settle. Emily had given birth. That was a fact. The hospital records confirmed it. And yet, Noah wasn't ours. I ran through the possibilities again. Maybe the hospital made a mistake in their records? Maybe someone had altered them? That seemed absurd, but what else could explain it? I needed more than just phone records. I needed something physical. So, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I drove to the hospital. Walking through the doors, I felt the weight of my own paranoia pressing down on me. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but I could barely force one back. Hi, I called a few days ago about a potential mix-up with my son's birth records. I was hoping to get more information. She gave me a cautious look. Sir, as I mentioned before, there's no indication of any mix-up. I know, but I'd like to speak with someone in person. Maybe check the physical records. She hesitated, then sighed. I can call the records supervisor. Please wait here. I sat down, my foot tapping uncontrollably. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Finally, a woman in a blue hospital coat approached me. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with sharp eyes that studied me like I was a puzzle. Mr. Thompson? She asked. Yes. She motioned for me to follow her. We walked down a long corridor until we reached a small office. Inside, she pulled up a file on her computer. Your wife, Emily Thompson, delivered in room 307 at 2:43 a.m. on March 5th, correct? Yes. She clicked through some documents. All the standard procedures were followed. There were no emergency transfers, no unexpected complications. She had a standard delivery, and your son was placed in her care immediately. I swallowed hard. And there were no other births that night? No, she confirmed. I leaned forward. What about security footage? Do you have cameras in the maternity ward? She hesitated. Yes, but the footage isn't stored indefinitely. Let me check. She pulled up another screen, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. Then she frowned. That's odd, she murmured. My stomach clenched. What? She shook her head. We typically keep footage for at least 3 months before it's archived. But for some reason, the recordings from the night of March 5th are missing. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. Missing? Yes. She clicked a few more buttons. It looks like it was manually erased. My breath hitched. Who has access to those files? Only authorized hospital staff. IT, security, and a few senior medical personnel. I leaned back, my mind spinning. Someone had erased the footage. That wasn't normal. That wasn't routine. That meant someone had something to hide. And that terrified me. Do you know who erased it? I asked. She shook her head. I can look into it, but these things are complicated. There might not be a record of who deleted it. I nodded slowly. Please. Anything you can find. As I left the hospital, I felt like I had just stepped into a conspiracy I never asked to be part of. The DNA test was one thing. The hospital records not matching was another. But missing footage? Someone deliberately covering something up? That was something far worse. I wasn't just dealing with a mystery anymore. I was dealing with a secret someone didn't want me to uncover. And I had no idea how dangerous that secret might be. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside the hospital, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. Someone had erased the footage from the night of Noah's birth. Someone with access. Someone who wanted to cover something up. But what? Was it just a mistake? A simple clerical error? Or was this something bigger? The thought made my stomach turn. I had to be careful. If someone had gone to the trouble of wiping the security footage, it meant they didn't want anyone asking questions. And here I was asking questions. I forced myself to take a breath, steady my shaking hands, and drive home. When I walked through the door, Emily was in the kitchen, swaying back and forth with Noah in her arms. She looked tired but peaceful. She smiled at me, and for a split second I wanted to pretend everything was normal. That my world wasn't crumbling under my feet. That my son was really my son. That my wife had actually given birth to him. But the weight of what I knew pressed down on me, suffocating, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I walked up to her slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Emily," I said. "We need to talk." Her smile faded. She knew something was wrong immediately. "What is it?" I hesitated. I had no idea how to say it. No clue where to even start. I swallowed hard. "It's about Noah." Her arms instinctively tightened around him as if protecting him. "What about him?" I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "I took a DNA test." Emily blinked, confused. "DNA test?" I nodded. "Two actually, just to be sure." She frowned, shaking her head. "I don't understand. Why would you?" "They both came back the same," I cut in, my voice trembling. "Emily, Noah isn't mine." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that stretched between us, wrapping around my throat like a noose. Emily's face went pale, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. "What?" "He isn't my son." Her eyes widened. "Mark, that's ridiculous." "I ran the test twice," I said, my voice breaking. "And it gets worse." She shook her head, still trying to process what I was saying. No, this doesn't make sense." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to continue. "The tests also showed that Noah isn't yours either." Emily's breath hitched. Her grip on Noah tightened, her hands trembling. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I gave birth to him, Mark." "I know." My voice cracked. "The hospital confirmed it. You delivered Noah in room 307 at 2:43 a.m. There were no other births that night. No records of a baby swap. No reports of anything unusual." Her lips quivered. "Then how?" "I don't know," I admitted, my throat tightening. "But someone erased the security footage from that night. The hospital should have had it, but it's gone. Deleted." Emily stared at me, her face a mix of confusion, fear, and disbelief. "This doesn't make any sense," she whispered. "I know," I said. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down at Noah, then back at me, her voice breaking. "What are you saying, Mark? That he just appeared?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't know what I'm saying," I admitted. "But whatever happened that night, we weren't supposed to find out." Emily shook her head, her breathing unsteady. "Mark, I felt him inside me. I carried him for 9 months. I gave birth to him." I reached out, gently placing my hands on her arms. "I believe you," I whispered. "But the DNA test doesn't lie." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Then where did our baby go?" she whispered. I had no answer. All I knew was that the child we had been raising, the child we had loved from the moment he came into this world, was never ours to begin with, and someone had made sure we'd never find out the truth. Until now. Emily sat down on the couch, holding Noah tightly against her chest as though I had just told her he was about to disappear. I watched as her fingers trembled against his tiny back, her breath coming out in uneven gasps. "This isn't real," she whispered, shaking her head. "It can't be real." I didn't know how to comfort her. I didn't even know how to comfort myself. Every word I had spoken felt like I was peeling back a layer of reality, only to reveal something far worse underneath. I sat down beside her, careful, slow. "I don't know what's going on, Em," I admitted, my voice raw. "But I swear to you we're going to find out." She swallowed hard, looking down at Noah. "Mark, if he isn't ours, then who is he?" I had been asking myself that same question over and over again. But now there was an even bigger one. Where was our real child? And why had someone gone to such extreme lengths to hide the truth? Emily wiped her eyes quickly, her voice steadier now. The hospital, she said. We need to go back. I already went back, I told her. The records match. The birth records, the room number, the time, everything says that Noah was born that night and placed in your arms. But someone erased the security footage. And whoever did that, they had a reason. Emily's face went pale again. You think someone did this on purpose? I nodded slowly. I think this wasn't just a mix-up. I think someone switched our baby before we ever even saw him. Emily covered her mouth, the weight of my words hitting her all at once. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she looked up at me, something different in her expression now. Determination. We're going back to that hospital, she said firmly. I nodded. Okay. No, I mean now. I hesitated. Em, it's late. I don't care. She stood up, adjusting Noah in her arms. If someone took our baby, I'm not waiting another second to start looking for him. There was no arguing with her. And honestly, I didn't want to. We drove in silence, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. When we arrived at the hospital, the lights in the lobby cast a dim glow over the front desk. The same receptionist from earlier was still there, tapping on her keyboard. She looked up, startled. Mr. Thompson? I need to see the records supervisor again, I said quickly. Right now. She frowned. Sir, it's very late. She won't be in until. This is an emergency, Emily cut in, her voice firm. The receptionist looked between us, hesitating. But something in Emily's expression must have told her not to argue. I can call security, she offered. I exhaled sharply, trying to stay calm. We're not here to cause trouble. But we need to speak to someone about what happened the night our son was born. The receptionist hesitated again. Then, after a long pause, she picked up the phone and dialed. We waited. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. Then, finally, the same woman from earlier, the record supervisor, walked into the lobby looking surprised to see me again. Mr. Thompson? She asked. Then her gaze flickered to Emily and Noah. Mrs. Thompson. Emily stepped forward. We need answers, she said. The woman sighed, rubbing her temple. I understand you're upset, but as I told your husband earlier, there are no reports of a baby mix-up. Emily's jaw clenched. Then explain why our son's DNA doesn't match either of us. The woman froze. Her face changed just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it. A flicker of something. Recognition? Guilt? It was so quick that if I had blinked, I might have missed it. I stepped forward. You know something, don't you? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I felt my pulse quicken. You do, I pressed. You know what happened that night. The woman swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the security cameras in the lobby. Emily noticed too. Someone's watching us, aren't they? She whispered. The woman's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but then just as quickly she shut her mouth and looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. I stepped even closer, lowering my voice. If someone forced you to stay quiet, we understand. But we deserve to know the truth. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then she turned back toward the receptionist's desk, grabbing a piece of paper and scribbling something down. She folded it, pressed it into my hand, and without another word, walked away. I glanced at Emily before carefully unfolding the note. There was no long message. No explanation. Just 3 words. Find Dr. Carter. I stared at the name, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Emily leaned over my shoulder. Who's Dr. Carter? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. And something told me, this was only the beginning. I stared at the name on the note, Dr. Carter. The ink was slightly smudged from my sweaty fingers. Emily leaned closer, reading over my shoulder, her breath shaky. Who is he? She whispered. I shook my head. No idea. The records supervisor had disappeared down the hall, leaving us standing in the middle of the hospital lobby with more questions than answers. Emily turned back to the receptionist. Dr. Carter. Does he work here? The woman's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Her expression was eerily blank, too neutral to be natural. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, voice steady, but we have no doctor by that name in our system. Liar. I knew it instantly. The way she avoided eye contact, the mechanical tone of her voice. Someone had trained her to say that. Emily stiffened beside me. Are you sure? He might have worked here a few years ago. No record. The woman's answer came too fast. Emily exhaled sharply. Well, do you have any files from? I'm sorry, ma'am, the receptionist interrupted, tone clipped this time. I can't help you. Emily clenched her jaw, ready to argue, but I grabbed her hand and squeezed it gently. We weren't getting anything more out of her. We turned and walked toward the exit, Emily's grip tightening around Noah. My mind was racing, processing everything at once. A hospital employee just gave us a cryptic lead. Another one was actively covering it up. We were onto something. But what? And why was everyone so afraid to talk about it? The cool night air hit me as we stepped outside. Emily turned to me, her expression a mixture of frustration and fear. Now what? I looked down at the note again. Find Dr. Carter. We find him, I said. Emily exhaled, shifting Noah in her arms. And how exactly do we do that when the hospital is clearly hiding something? I thought for a moment, then pulled out my phone. If he worked here, there has to be some trace of him online. I typed his name into Google. Hundreds of results. Too many to sift through. I narrowed the search. Dr. Carter plus, hospital name. One result. An old medical journal entry from 8 years ago. Authored by Dr. Richard Carter, neonatal specialist. Bingo. I clicked the link. The article was dense, filled with medical jargon, but at the bottom was a short bio. Dr. Richard Carter was a leading expert in neonatal genetics and infant care. Formerly affiliated with hospital name, he resigned suddenly in 2018 and has maintained a private practice since. Resigned suddenly. That raised a red flag. I scrolled further. There was an office address. Emily leaned over my shoulder, reading along. When she saw the address, her breath caught. That's only 20 minutes from here, she murmured. I looked at her. You up for a late-night visit? She met my gaze, determination shining through the exhaustion. Let's go. We piled back into the car, the weight of the night pressing down on us. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping anxiously against my knee. A hospital cover-up. Erased security footage. A doctor who suddenly vanished from the public eye. And somewhere hidden beneath all of it, our real child. I gritted my teeth, pressing the gas pedal a little harder. We needed answers. And we were about to get them. The office was in a quiet part of town, nestled between a row of abandoned storefronts. The building itself wasn't run down, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. The sign out front was faded. Dr. Richard Carter, private consultation. The lights inside were still on. I parked and glanced at Emily. Ready? She nodded, though I could see her hands trembling slightly as she clutched Noah. We stepped out, the night air eerily silent. I knocked on the glass door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Emily shifted uneasily beside me. Maybe he's not here. Before she could finish, the blinds moved. Just a sliver. But enough for me to see the shadow behind them. Someone was inside. I knocked a third time. Dr. Carter? We need to talk. Silence. Then the door unlocked with a quiet click. It opened just enough for a man to peer out. His face was gaunt, eyes wary. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in years. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. Emily stepped forward. Please. We just need. He shook his head violently. No. It's too dangerous. Dangerous? My pulse spiked. Dr. Carter, we know something happened at the hospital. We know the records were wiped. We know Noah isn't ours. His entire body stiffened. For a second, I thought he might slam the door in our faces. But then, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Come inside, he muttered. He opened the door just enough for us to slip through. I stepped inside first, scanning the dimly lit office. Papers were stacked haphazardly on the desk. Shelves overflowed with files. A faint smell of coffee and something metallic hung in the air. Dr. Carter locked the door behind us and turned, his gaze flickering between me, Emily, and Noah. Then very softly he said, I've been waiting for someone like you to show up. A chill ran down my spine. Emily's grip tightened on my arm. What do you mean? Dr. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. He moved toward his desk, sifting through a pile of papers. How much do you know? I swallowed hard. We know the hospital is hiding something. We know our son, our real son, is missing. And we know Noah isn't ours. Dr. Carter let out a slow, shaky breath. Then you only know half the truth. He pulled out a file, placed it on the desk, and opened it. Inside were pictures, documents, medical reports. I stepped closer, and what I saw made my stomach lurch. Rows of photographs, newborn babies, each one with a red X drawn over them, each one labeled with a name. I scanned the names, my fingers trembling. Then I saw it. Noah Thompson. But the baby in the photo wasn't the Noah in Emily's arms. Emily gasped. That's our real son, I whispered. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. Emily let out a small, strangled sound. Where is he? Where's our baby? Dr. Carter hesitated. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Listen to me carefully, he said, his voice grave. You need to leave this alone. Right now. Emily's face twisted in horror. Leave it alone? Are you insane? Our baby is out there somewhere. Someone stole him from us. Dr. Carter looked down, his jaw tight. You don't understand. The people behind this, they're powerful. They don't make mistakes. They don't leave loose ends. I stepped forward, my own fear twisting into anger. Who are they? Dr. Carter closed his eyes. The ones who created Noah. Silence. Then Emily whispered, Created? Dr. Carter exhaled, rubbing his temples. I shouldn't be telling you this, but you're already too deep. He gestured toward the file. These babies, they weren't switched at birth. My heart pounded. Then what happened? Dr. Carter looked me dead in the eyes. They were never supposed to exist. The words sent a shiver through my entire body. Emily clutched Noah protectively. What are you saying? Dr. Carter took a slow, deliberate breath. I'm saying, your son wasn't stolen. He looked at Noah. The baby in your arms was placed with you on purpose. Emily inhaled sharply. My knees nearly buckled. And in that moment I knew, whatever we had just uncovered, was bigger than we ever could have imagined. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I could hear Emily's breathing, sharp, uneven. Noah stirred in her arms, oblivious to the fact that our entire world was shattering around us. Dr. Carter's words echoed in my head. The baby in your arms was placed with you on purpose. I took a slow step forward, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean, placed with us? Dr. Carter's eyes darted toward the door, as if he expected someone to burst in at any moment. He ran a hand through his graying hair, then exhaled shakily. There's something I need you to see, he muttered. He turned and moved toward a locked filing cabinet in the corner. I heard the clink of keys, the metallic slide of a drawer. Then he pulled out a thick manila folder and tossed it onto the desk. Emily and I exchanged a glance before stepping forward. Inside were documents, pages filled with dense medical terminology, genetic codes, and attached photographs. But my eyes locked onto a section labeled, Experiment Group A, Neonatal Trials. My stomach twisted. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? Dr. Carter hesitated. Then with a heavy sigh he said, a list of babies. Babies that were manufactured. The word sent a jolt through me. Manufactured. I repeated, my voice hollow. Dr. Carter sat down, rubbing his temples. It started as an experimental program. High-level, off-the-books research. Genetic manipulation, artificial embryo development. Things the world wasn't ready to know about. A select group of newborns were created, monitored, and then placed with unsuspecting families. Families like yours. I felt like I was going to be sick. Emily was already shaking her head, pulling Noah closer. That's insane. We were pregnant. I carried him. I gave birth to him. Dr. Carter's expression darkened. Did you? Emily's breath caught. What? Dr. Carter leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Think back to your pregnancy. Were there complications? Gaps in memory? Medical procedures that didn't make sense? Emily swallowed hard, confusion flashing across her face. She hesitated. Then her expression changed. I saw the realization hit her like a freight train. She turned to me, eyes wide. The hospital stays. The early ultrasounds they said were inconclusive. The sudden emergency C-section I barely remember. Her voice trembled. Mark, I didn't carry him to full term. They put me under early. I woke up and they told me Noah was born. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My wife had given birth to a child that wasn't biologically ours. Dr. Carter nodded solemnly. You were implanted with an embryo, one of the project's experimental subjects. You did give birth, but not in the way you thought. My hands curled into fists. And our real baby? My voice was raw. Where is our child? Dr. Carter's gaze flickered downward. That hesitation made my blood run cold. You need to understand, he said, the babies in this program, they weren't just monitored. They were sorted. The ones that met certain criteria were placed in homes. The others were taken elsewhere. My stomach churned. Elsewhere. Dr. Carter hesitated again. Some were terminated, he admitted. Others were placed in controlled environments for further testing. Emily let out a choked sob. I grabbed the edge of the desk to keep myself upright. Dr. Carter's voice softened. I don't know where your biological son is, but if he met certain genetic requirements, he might still be alive. Alive. The word sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through my veins. Emily wiped her eyes, her voice shaking with anger. Who's behind this? Who did this to us? Dr. Carter opened his mouth. Then, a loud bang echoed through the office. We all flinched. Dr. Carter's face drained of color. He shot to his feet, rushing to the blinds, peering through them. Emily clutched Noah to her chest. What was that? Dr. Carter turned to us, his expression grim. They found you. My pulse spiked. Who? Before he could answer, another bang. This time, the doorknob rattled violently. Someone was trying to get in. Emily gasped. Oh my God. Dr. Carter grabbed my arm, his grip firm. Listen to me. There's a back exit. Take your wife and your son and run. I didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing Emily's hand, I yanked her toward the hallway. Dr. Carter moved ahead of us, fumbling with a set of keys, unlocking a door at the back of the office. As we rushed through, I heard the front door burst open. Voices. Heavy footsteps. They're in here, someone shouted. Dr. Carter shoved the back door open. Go. Now. I didn't look back. I wrapped an arm around Emily, keeping her close as we sprinted into the cold night air. Behind us, I heard a struggle, grunts, a crash, the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Then, gunfire. Emily let out a muffled scream, her grip tightening on Noah. I forced myself not to stop, not to think. We ran down the alleyway, my mind in overdrive. Dr. Carter had given us answers. But now, the people responsible for this, whoever they were, knew that we knew. And they weren't about to let us walk away. As we reached the end of the alley, headlights suddenly flooded the darkness. A black SUV screeched to a stop in front of us. Doors swung open. Figures stepped out. I skidded to a halt, my heart pounding. Then a familiar voice called out. Get in. Now. I turned and my stomach dropped. It was the record supervisor. The same woman from the hospital who had slipped me the note. Her eyes were urgent, her voice sharp. If you want to live, get in the car. Emily clutched my arm, terror in her eyes. Mark. More voices behind us. More footsteps. We were out of time. I made a split-second decision. Grabbing Emily, I shoved her into the SUV, climbed in after her, and slammed the door shut. The tires screeched as we peeled away, leaving the gunfire, the office, and Dr. Carter behind us. I turned to the woman in the driver's seat, my voice raw. Who the hell are you? She glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I'm your only chance at finding your son. Emily let out a shaky breath. I clenched my fist, because deep down I knew. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The SUV sped through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past us. My heart pounded like a war drum, my mind racing. Emily held Noah tightly, her breathing still ragged. I reached over, squeezing her hand, but my own was ice cold. I turned my attention to the driver, the woman from the hospital records office. Start talking, I demanded. Who are you? What the hell is going on? She didn't glance at me, eyes locked on the road. My name isn't important, she said, voice clipped. What is important is that you listen, and you listen carefully. Because from this moment on, your lives are in danger. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, I figured that part out when someone started shooting at us. Emily flinched at the memory, holding Noah closer. The woman exhaled through her nose. I worked at the hospital where Noah was born, but that wasn't my real job. I was placed there to monitor the program. To make sure families like yours never found out the truth. The program, I repeated. Dr. Carter said the babies were manufactured. Is that true? The woman's grip tightened on the wheel. Yes. Emily let out a shaky breath. What? Why would they do something like this? The woman hesitated, then said, because they were designed. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Designed for what? She finally glanced at me through the rearview mirror. To be perfect. Silence filled the car. What? Emily whispered. The woman shifted gears, taking a sharp turn. The program was part of a larger genetic experiment. Select embryos were engineered with specific enhancements, stronger immune systems, accelerated cognitive abilities, resistance to diseases. Babies who would grow into superior humans. A controlled generation of better people. The words made my skin crawl. That's sick, I muttered. Emily's voice cracked. Then why place them with families? Why raise them as normal children? The woman's expression darkened. Because they needed to see if the enhancements worked in real environments. If the babies would develop naturally. If they'd be stable. A lump formed in my throat. And the ones who weren't stable? She hesitated. They were removed. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. I felt sick. For the past few weeks, I thought I was uncovering a mistake. A hospital mix-up. A cruel accident. But this wasn't an accident. This was intentional. I forced myself to focus. Dr. Carter said there was a list. A list of children who were placed. That means, my breath caught. Our real baby is still out there. The woman nodded. Yes, but finding him won't be easy. I swallowed hard. You said you were assigned to monitor the program. Why are you helping us now? For the first time, her expression softened. Because I didn't sign up for this, she said. I thought I was part of something that would change the world for the better. But when I saw what they were really doing, I knew I had to get out. I studied her, trying to read between the lines. And now, she tightened her grip on the wheel. Now, I want to burn the whole thing down. Emily let out a shaky breath. Then tell us everything. Who's behind this? Who did this to us? The woman hesitated. It's not just one organization. It's a coalition of private biotech firms, government agencies, and people with power. The kind of people you don't cross. I gritted my teeth. And yet here you are, crossing them. A smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. Yeah, well, I've already got one foot in the grave. Might as well make it count. Emily shifted in her seat, looking out the window. So what now? Where are we going? The woman's expression turned serious again. There's someone who might have answers. Someone who used to work inside the program before they disappeared off the grid. If anyone can tell you where your real son is, it's them. I leaned forward. Who? She took another sharp turn, the tires screeching. A scientist, a defector. The one person the program wants dead more than anyone else. Emily's grip on my hand tightened. And where do we find them? I asked. The woman's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, then to the road ahead. In a place no one dares to look. She pressed down on the gas. I took a deep breath, my mind spinning. We were in deeper than I ever could have imagined. And we were only getting started. The SUV roared down the highway, the city lights fading behind us. Emily held Noah close, her body tense. I could feel her heartbeat, fast and uneven. I turned to the woman driving. Where exactly are we going? She didn't look away from the road. A safe house. There's someone there who can help us. I narrowed my eyes. Who? She hesitated. Then in a low voice she said, Dr. Elias Voss. A chill ran through me. That name, I knew that name. Voss was infamous in the medical world. A brilliant geneticist who vanished years ago after being accused of unethical human trials. He was a ghost, a whisper in dark conversations. No one knew if he was dead or just hiding. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. He's alive. The woman nodded. And if anyone knows where your real son is, it's him. I exhaled sharply, my fingers tightening into a fist. This was it. A real lead. But something gnawed at me. If Voss had the answers, why had he never come forward? I pushed the thought away as we drove deeper into the countryside. Trees lined the road, stretching into darkness. The hum of the tires was the only sound for miles. Then, out of nowhere, the SUV's headlights flickered. The engine stuttered. The woman cursed under her breath, gripping the wheel as the dashboard lights dimmed. No, 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 this isn't happening. I sat up straight. What's wrong? Before she could answer, the engine died completely. The SUV coasted to a stop in the middle of the empty road. Silence. Emily clutched my arm. Mark? Something was wrong. The woman tried restarting the car. Nothing. She yanked a flashlight from the glove box. Stay here. Lock the doors. Then she stepped outside. A cold wind rushed in as she disappeared toward the hood of the SUV. I swallowed hard. Something doesn't feel right. Emily gripped Noah tighter. I don't like this, Mark. Neither did I. I reached for the door handle, hesitating. My gut screamed at me to stay put. But I couldn't just sit here. I slowly pushed the door open, stepping out into the night. The air was too quiet. No crickets. No wind. Just an eerie, unnatural silence. I took a step toward the front of the car. Hey, what's going on? No response. I rounded the hood. The woman was gone. I stopped dead. The flashlight lay on the ground, still glowing. But she was nowhere in sight. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Then, a rustling sound. From the trees. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was watching us. I turned back toward the car. And that's when I saw them. Figures. Emerging from the darkness. Dressed in black. Moving fast. Coming straight for us. My blood turned to ice. Emily, run. I threw open the car door, grabbing her hand. Noah let out a frightened cry as we stumbled out of the SUV and bolted into the trees. Branches clawed at us. The ground was uneven. Emily nearly tripped, but I caught her, pushing forward. Behind us, footsteps thundered. Voices shouted. Flashlights cut through the darkness. We ran. Faster. Deeper into the woods. The sound of pursuit was everywhere. Then, Emily gasped. Mark, look. Up ahead, through the trees. A cabin. Lights glowing inside. Hope surged through me. If we could just get there. I grabbed Emily's hand and sprinted. The footsteps behind us grew louder. They were closing in. 30 feet. 20. 10. We burst through the cabin door, slamming it shut behind us. Panting. Shaking. Emily clutched Noah, her eyes wide with fear. I turned, searching the room. It was small. Cramped. Paper stacked everywhere. Old medical equipment scattered across tables. A single dim light bulb flickered overhead. And in the corner, a man sat in an old chair, watching us. He looked older than I expected. His hair gray, his eyes sharp but weary. He didn't seem surprised to see us, like he had been expecting us. Emily whispered, Who are you? The man leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Then, in a calm, measured voice, he said, My name is Dr. Elias Voss. A chill ran down my spine. We had found him. But outside, the men were still coming. And something told me, this nightmare was far from over.